the young man in it.
I don't believe they did. That was
Studio One production.
Yeah.
90 minutes. The difference is, like
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Let's get you a mic.
the difference was, like the film, you could focus. The director focused on one actor, and we didn't see what the other 11 actors were doing. And so somebody's chewing the scenery, and we see this, and we feel it perhaps because it was very well acted, but it didn't have the impact that this play had because you couldn't see 12 angry men. You just saw one or two at a time, and they were excellent actors, many of whom were more villainous, I guess you would say. They were not on the side of reasonable doubt. Later went on to be attorneys and all sorts of things in television series that they couldn't play those characters again probably because they were very obnoxious characters. But it was not. It was, as I say, there was a director who was making a choice where the camera was going to be looking, and he's a director that has 12 men on the stage, and we might have had 300 people in the audience, and we're looking where we want to look at. And I'm looking at a juror down here who is reacting to what the juror over here is saying, or he's not reacting. And then there's a reason for it, and you get this overall scene, and the emotion builds from this stage production, and it just reaches out, and you become one of the jurors. And my wife, who'd never seen this, had right away thought, well, this is one of these bleeding heart things. And by the time you got to the end, when you talk about the glasses, take the glasses off, the markings there, my wife is going, right on. That was reasonable doubt for her. So she came out saying, where has this play been all my life? She avoided it, and it was just, it was one of the most wonderful experiences in going to the theater that I've ever had. There are not that many times when you walk out and you're kind of drained by the emotion of the situation. And I'm way in the back. And I just thought you did a fabulous job, and your actors were not actors. They were the 12 angry men.
I'll pass it on.
I think we may have identified a flaw in the film if they added that. And, that happens in film. They add things sometimes that do things that the playwright wouldn't have wanted. I don't know. Did Reginald Rose write the play, the script for the movie?
Yeah.
So maybe he didn't think that through. I think it's just a very lucky thing in a way.
Well, of
that
course,
people who see the play rather than never seen the movie, the they is less, is more applicable to. It's just less focused. I think you're saying that's a good point. Is well taken.
Thank you. I don't think Reginald Rose wrote. He wouldn't have written in the film that we see the Latino kid that's in the film. That would have been a directorial choice. He wouldn't write, and here the camera cuts to the kid. That's just a director, and that's Hollywood partly, just making sure that somehow everything is spelled out in a certain way. And of course, the theater tries to be character narrative driven in a different way, which of course I appreciate more being in the theater. But
when I looked at the program, I don't know why, I was surprised that there was a fight coach.
You were surprised that there's a fight director?
Yeah, I don't know why I was, but tell me more how your interaction works with a fight director. Of course they were angry men, but I don't know.
I just fight with them all the time, all day long. I just go, come over here, Jason. Let's disagree on something. No, our fight director is a very important component who works on all 6 shows, and any physical violence that you see on stage, so I'm going to kill you, that whole thing, he works with me to articulate and then stage that violence. So it's safe, the actors can repeat it. I basically have to clearly, and other directors say, this is what I want here, like the fights in King John, some of the little moves that you'll see in Peter and the Starcatcher, leaps and things like that. We have someone who's a specialist in that who helps us put that together. Even down to when Max, number 3, has to stab down and in, Jason's looking at that to make sure he knows where he's stopping, how to make sure that it's repeatable in the same kind of way, and that all comes through, you know, Jason will say something like, where do you want this to happen? And I'll say, well, I've staged everything up to it and after it. So we just need to isolate where the violence happens. I think it happens right here center stage. Let's just do it by the numbers. And we go very slowly, put it together, rewind, start putting it back together faster and faster until it reaches a place. So, yeah. They're equivalent to a choreographer, you know. They're just a choreographer of violence.
That's a terrifying moment on stage.
Yes, it is.
With the knife. Yeah.
The way everyone else reacts is amazing.
Yeah.
On stage and off. And you feel the tension in the audience. That's yes.
We've learned a lot from the audiences, actually, just from first preview. I will say that you have taught me and two audiences that there's first of all, I've always felt like the success, this production, if we could be successful if by the end you're not judging, but you're swept up in the emotion of that beautiful moment that number 3 has about his son, where you realize this is all about that. And Max is so beautiful in that moment because it makes you erase everything, at least for me, everything that you've felt about his position. That's a performance that is filled with so much virtuosity. It's incredible. So the audience has taught me that you'll buy that too, what my instinct was. And the other thing is that the mystery, the edge of your seat kind of thriller of this play continues to deepen, that watching the votes change, you know, and those things where you start to kind of be implicated in, oh, they're going my way, you know, and you start rooting, and that's been really great, you know, for me to track. And I've made small adjustments even in yesterday's rehearsal. I sped up the vote that leads to 6-6 and took all the air out of it, because what I realized is from the first preview, if it's slower and you can follow it and count with us, it doesn't reveal as much impact if you can't, and then they say 6-6, you know? So just little things that I've learned from you all that have been really helpful and will continue to be, you know, over the next couple of weeks.
I'm just curious here. You mentioned something about civics classes a while ago, David, and how many people here have had a civics class when they were in school? Oh my. Okay. I volunteered my time at my granddaughter's elementary school, and you wouldn't believe what they're not teaching
I know.
these days. This is in the state of Washington now. I don't know what Utah and Nevada and
Yeah, well, civics is gone. I mean,
civics
it's been,
is gone. Yeah,
I mean, it's been sort of like, you know, absorbed by history classes.
Oh,
and
shame!
I know
upon
it's
us.
really
Shame upon us.
I know it's really tough because it's such a foundation for being a citizen. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely. A democracy is supposed to be contingent upon a well-informed citizenry, and if you're not well-informed about what your role in that is,
Exactly.
it's a responsibility.
Exactly.
The other thing that doesn't have anything to do with this at all is that they're not teaching cursive either.
Yeah, I know.
How can you read the Constitution if you can't?
Yeah, I know. Well, it's true, and I will say, Brian and I have talked about this, and unfortunately, as long as they'll keep us here, you'll have to follow along with us a little bit as we raise our children, because part of what informs our programming is that, and that's, you know, I want to be able to present material that better informs the next generation of our citizenry, you know? If I could just get the rights to Catcher in the Rye, we could not only build the new theater just on creating that play, they won't give it up, but that's another, you know, it's nothing to do with, you know, citizenship, but to talk about you know, just an incredible, iconic thing that every kid ought to be able to read and then see in person, but Salinger's estate won't give it up for anything.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Okay, just to correct some misrepresentations, I am a member of a school board here in Utah. Cursive is taught in the state of Utah.
Awesome.
And civics courses, the principles are taught, but they're integrated into other classes.
Yeah, they're absorbed by other.
But
yeah.
it is taught, so
Yeah.
just wanted to
Thank you.
correct.
Appreciate that.
The line, he's not your son. I thought that was very important. I understand it's not in the movie, and I wondered how how you felt about that. I thought it was critical to
Yeah.
put that in.
Well, we didn't. I didn't. We didn't put it in. It's in the
Well,
script. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
There's nothing in the. I mean, I have to think this way about every script. There's nothing in the script that is irrelevant. Nothing.
Right.
And yeah, the line is, "He's not your boy." Actually, it's someone else's.
Yeah.
And then "Let him live," by juror number 4. And yeah, I mean that's what we're all thinking.
Yes.
And someone says it, you know.
I just wanted to say kudos to everyone that's been talking. I really loved it. I had seen the movie quite a while ago, and I loved, the performance, and I liked the fact that I didn't think about any racial anything at all until he started that, and so I think that was marvelous. I have an adopted daughter who's mixed race, and she deals with a lot of racial issues, and it almost makes me think that I would love to have them showing this film or being part of the theater to see this to all the students, so that they would kind of get an idea that it's not a racial matter. It doesn't have to be. Anyway, I just really appreciate being able to see this. Thanks.
Thank you.
The question I had was, it was really neat for me to have the audience kind of participating with the jury, because
Yeah.
I wondered if that was kind of surprising to you all, or did that happen like in the other, when you had the other preview, because people applauding when somebody finally got, well, hello, you finally realized that couldn't have happened, and everybody clapped, and I just thought, how did you feel about that, having that kind of thing happen?
Well, I think, I felt great about it. I think I had an instinct about it, I think, more than the actors, because the actors are so focused, and I think let me say this, the two audiences that we've had, the first and the second, were both incredibly invested in the play, in terms of their literally like sort of oral response to it, and us hearing the reactions, but in different places and with a different amount of kind of zest in certain places. You guys that saw it yesterday applauded, in several or a couple places. That didn't happen on the first preview, but there were gasps galore in the first preview. I knew instinctually that people would start to follow the vote. I just think that's part of the structure, and be surprised. But I think the actors were thrilled, that they had, you were implicated, that you had to have a voice in this, and that's going to help them. And the cool thing is, I think all summer it's going to be different, depending on the mix of the audience and how that's made up.
Where's the microphone? And there's a gentleman over here who has a comment.
Okay.
Do we know? Oh, you have. Okay, here and then there and then back to you. Okay.
Awesome. Okay, so I was going back to the blocking and the fight choreography. I noticed that I was watching the reactions of the actors who weren't having a main part of the role at the time. So, for example, the man who had the baseball game to go to, when there were confrontations between people, he would, as everybody was trying to stop him, he would take 4 steps back, and I thought that was very interesting. And I was just wondering how much of that is actor's instinct or direction from you?
Both. It's a healthy combination of both. There's a lot of, there's a lot of, like, Jamie in that role. I'd done character conferences, sat down with every one of them outside of rehearsal and what we call secondary rehearsals for an hour, and said, let's talk about this guy, And so we start to just fill backstory, And in one rehearsal, when we were putting stuff together, Jamie just said, I have this feeling that he, asserts himself and all sorts of stuff, but like when the thing actually happens, I'm sort of know how to get out of, like a good salesman, get out of it and not, And I was like, great, I love it. Let's watch it together. So it's absorbed, but it doesn't pull focus, that it doesn't become about number 7's fight or flight kind of syndrome. And everyone had an instinct about that, so it was me kind of going, that's great, I love it. You're fanning yourself with a really white pad, and it's pulling focus, so let's get you a smaller pad. It was literally down to those kinds of details. So it's a healthy combination of, actors started to have ideas, and mostly I've tried to embrace them, and then structure them in a way that it still added to the ensemble and the whole. It's a good observation, though.
Yeah, two things. At the very end of the play, when juror number 8 hands the hat to juror number 3, that's in the script?
No.
I didn't think it was, and I haven't read the script, but I thought that was a very, very well done, and it sent a very good message to all of us in the audience. The other thing I want to say is I would not have seen this play if it hadn't been for my husband. He's the one that wanted to see it, and I said, 12 Angry Men now. And the reason I mention this, because some other people have mentioned it, we really need to get the word out on this play.
Bless your heart.
Each one of us needs to get the word out that this is not to be missed. And thank you so much, David. It was
Thank
wonderful.
you. Well, you know, I will say what will help with that. I really appreciate these comments. This has been a labor of love for me, and we always have as directors a little postpartum after a play opens, and I've got to recede back to my office and start budgeting for 2014 and everything else. But this is going to be a hard one. It's been so fun to be in the room. And I'll tell you one thing that would help, and this might be helpful for you to know. In the slot that the show is in, it's currently always a slot, except for To Kill a Mockingbird, which is in the slot, but that has such a title and everyone knows the book. It's in a slot that is projected lower. And what that means is if we have a knockout production in this slot and it sells, our profit margin is so much higher if it takes off, because it's projected low and we're hoping it does well. So your help in selling it will actually really increase the potential of this season to make a lot of money. And if it does, of course, the resources then go back into the company and deepening the artist. So wherever you're from, South Jordan, just when reviews start to come out in the Tribune or wherever, a letter to the editor, or just, hey, I was in Cedar City and saw 5 sentences out to a paper or to a blog, you have no idea how much that will help. Or even on our website on our Facebook page from patrons. If you feel that you're called to that kind of civic duty for the Utah Shakespeare Festival, then really it would be extremely helpful, because you know these guys are incredible and they deserve this thing to be seen. You know.
I just want to pick up on the civic duty idea. I have been on a jury, actually 2 or 3 times, and there is this dynamic that once you're picked to get on there, you suddenly feel this weight, I mean, at least I did, of responsibility, and you start taking it more seriously. You don't talk about it, all of that. I thought you captured that, the idea that when you come in, you think, oh, I saw it, and this is going to be quick. Everybody saw it my way, and the guy's guilty, and let's go. And it didn't happen that way at all, and I wish I had seen this or read it before I was on a jury, because I would have had the courage to stand my ground. I think I was the only one that didn't see it, that thought it was going to be obvious, and everybody else went, were we watching the same trial?
Yeah, right.
Did we hear the same testimony? So I would have had a different experience had I seen this and thought it through. So I do teach drama out of an anthology kind of thing, and this play is not in any of the anthologies I've taught, and I will really definitely look at it now and say, yes, let's do it.
I'm petrified to sit on a jury now, because all I feel like I'll be doing is watching the blocking in the room and who's like going where, you know.
I just want to say from you know what a lot of you have said, it was very moving, and from people that have watched it before, watched the movie, Henry Fonda, and it was so moving that, you know, I got teary-eyed at the end. I mean, the whole hat thing, and you know, you're just kind of caught up in it just because of great direction and acting, and you know, all that goes into that. But I looked over, and my husband, who has seen it many times, was wiping his eyes. And so we were just drawn into the story, and even though we knew the story and we knew the outcome, it was very emotionally moving, and I so appreciate that. I want to ask you can you share what your notes were from after the show yesterday?
I didn't take a lot of notes yesterday. Mostly I felt like you guys, I think. You know, I had this tremendous sense of relief. I think from the first preview, they just took another step. And to be honest with you, I was teary-eyed. I was complete. David Mickelson, a costume designer who I've known since I was 19, who designed the clothes and has designed a lot here and for me elsewhere. I just gave him this giant hug. He was bawling. I was crying. You know, I had a few little technical notes, sound cues bumped up. I need to bump up a little bit, just because the audience in the space takes up volume, so we could afford the thunder to maybe just creak up a little bit. Trying to I'd have to go back to my notes, but not a lot, honestly. Basically, that's why I called everyone, was just to kind of go, wow, guys, unbelievable. Down here.
I'm sorry, I got here late. We were delayed.
Oh, that's all right.
I have a question, but I want to say before I ask my question that I'm going to be 77 this fall. I think this is the best play I've ever seen.
Oh, so nice. You look great, by the way.
Thank you. But I do have a question, and it's kind of a technical question, I guess, and that's about the second knife. And realizing what it means to be on a jury and what it takes to get into a courtroom today, you would never get into a courtroom with a second knife.
No, and you wouldn't then either.
Okay.
That's where we take like our cues from Shakespeare and make a dramatic departure for the sake of drama. We discussed it. You know, the two things that we went on and on about were that, and that there's a newspaper in the room, he's a stockbroker. But I did, we did great and really exciting research on this. It was so fun to kind of dive into all this. And one of the things that we discovered was that actually, because I felt it was really weird to bring a knife in and everyone passes it around. But actually, that happens now with evidence. Because everything that's needed has already been taken care of, all the sampling, everything, before before the jury deliberates. But yes, you're right. The knife is just, no way would it happen. The other thing I'd just say really quickly for you to think about, because this was astonishing to me, is I started getting in this 3 a.m. wake up thing about reasonable doubt, you know? And my thought was, well, what's reasonable to one person? Like, is our system flawed? You know, you have to take, it's like, you know, Iago, what's reasonable to Iago, and he's a very smart man, is completely different than what's reasonable to Hamlet, you know? And so that's a really interesting thing in our system. So it got me prompted to say, who defined originally where, when, what reasonable doubt is? And how you measure that, and how you're all in a room coming at this from a different place, have to decide that term. And it's so loose in the definition. It's doubt that's reasonable. Oh, thank you. That clarifies everything, you know. So if you're interested in doing more study, Google that and see how absolutely confusing and how deep that definition goes into research. It's incredible.
Okay, final comment from, yes, this gentleman here. Or is the
Mike's coming behind you there.
I have a T-shirt that says Guns and Moses, but please don't hate me for that.
I don't hate you. I don't hate you at all.
Well, I think...
you can wear it to my son's T-ball game if you want.
And sit next to the person with the AK-47 T-shirt on, right?
Can we hug while I wear my Obama T-shirt?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
You know, one of the things that's so fascinating in these discussions is to see how the production informs comments here that you wouldn't expect. And several of you have said the other day and today that you were not going to go see 12 Angry Men, but something persuaded you that perhaps you ought to go see it, or you would like to go see it, and that you're glad that you have, which is, I don't know if we talk to those jurors, if how many of them would say, I'm glad I listened, I'm glad I changed my mind, I'm glad I served on the jury, I'm glad I missed the baseball game. Of course, the rain changed that, so there wasn't a baseball game. But it's so fascinating to see, and I'm waiting, and I bet this will happen, having been at these in the Grove for 10 years, 9 years. There will be someone who will raise their hand here and say, I was juror number 3. That is my story. And it's phenomenal how, and that's what live theater at its best does. And I usually don't give my opinion, but David Ivers has done a masterful job, and his artistic team with this show. In my
Thank you.
in my
Nancy.
previous life, I worked as a newspaper reporter and a theater critic, and it's the kind of play that you are just you can't wait to start writing about it, and you think, how can I write in such a way that I will get people to go see it? And you can't ever do that. What you do is you hope that your writing will somehow keep the reader interested in seeing the theater, and I just hope this is a sellout all summer
Thanks,
long.
I do too.
So David, thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about The Tempest and Peter and the Starcatcher. Brian Vaughn will be here, and we'll have a surprise guest for The Tempest.